Hi, my name's Eric, and I'll be reading you selections from the e-edition of today's Cape Cod Times. Today's date is Monday, September 8th of 2025. We're licking our wounds after the Patriots got beaten yesterday in a ugly game with the Las Vegas Raiders. We'll move on, though, into something that might be a little bit better, the weather. Today across the Cape and Islands, sun through high clouds. It'll be less humid than it was over the weekend. A high of 71 expected. Low of 53 in the overnight tonight. Partly cloudy. So you might want to close those windows. Starting to get chilly in the overnight. Partly sunny and beautiful tomorrow, Tuesday. High of 71, low of 59. On Wednesday, it'll be breezy in the morning. Partly sunny. We don't really have rain in the forecast for these weekdays. High of 68, a low of 60. On Thursday, pleasant with sunshine and a few clouds, high of 75, a low of 57. And Friday, high of 70 and a low of 53, pleasant with sun through high clouds again. So a rainless week ahead, at least according to AccuWeather. The sun will rise at 6:14 a.m. today. It'll set at 7:02 p.m. We'll have 12 hours and 48 minutes of daylight. The moon will rise at 7:29 p.m. and set at 7:06 a.m. On the front cover of today's Cape Cod Times, CAP was introduced to reduce racial bias. There is very little local news in today's Cape Cod Times. But Army program derided as woke by Hegseth didn't elevate non-white officers by Davis Winke of the USA Today. An Army program for selecting unit commanders that a spokesman for newly designated Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, condemned as woke, selected white men for command roles at a higher rate than women and minority officers, according to internal data that was reviewed by USA Today. In 2024, it thwarted a four-star general's attempt to boost an unfit subordinate. The Army's Command Assessment Program, known as CAP, screened officers for career-defining command jobs by combining a series of physical and mental tests with feedback from previous peers and subordinates. It existed independent of the service's promotion system. But Hegseth directed the program's cancellation, celebrating the move in a September 3rd social media post saying good riddance. Pentagon Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson, in a statement to USA Today, said Hegseth alone ordered the move because it was a failed woke experiment. Secretary Hegseth has been clear. Promotions across the Department of War will be based on merit and performance, not trendy social fads, Wilson said. The department's priority is building a lethal, effective military where leadership is earned, not handed out through flawed programs. President Donald Trump signed an executive order on September 5th allowing the use of Department of War as a secondary name for the Department of Defense and the use of Secretary of War and Deputy Secretary of War in official government communications without officially changing the name, which would require action by Congress. The CAP program was considered a crown jewel of the Army's talent management reforms, said Mike Arnold, a fellow at the right-leaning Hoover Institution think tank and former deputy director of the Army Talent Management Task Force. CAP was designed to resemble how elite special operations units identify their members and leaders. When the CAP pilot began in 2019 during Trump's first administration, Army leaders celebrated the departure from the service's 1970s vintage practice of relying only on hurried paper-based personnel file reviews to pick key commanders. No longer will we spend weeks selecting a private for the Ranger Regiment, a special operations unit, while spending an average of 2 minutes to select battalion commanders, said now retired General James McConville, then the Army's Chief of Staff, in a 2019 article. At the multi-day NFL Combined Style event, hopeful commanders had to pass fitness and body fat testing before undergoing psychological evaluation. An interview panel of senior officers weighed the results and a candidate's verbal and written communication abilities before voting on their fitness for command. After passing, an officer's ranking for command assignment was calculated from their CAP performance and their personnel file. The Army will now return to its paper-based model of command selection, where a board of officers rapidly reviews a candidate's personnel file. That model, according to Arnold, is based almost solely on subjective performance evaluations about the length of a tweet. CAP's double-blind method of hiding a candidate's identity from the senior officer panel voting on their file removed race from consideration. Yet, white men had the highest pass rate in the program, according to program data reviewed by USA Today. Women and minority officers were more likely to be found not yet certified for command. CAP is designed to reduce bias for everybody, not just for minorities, said Arnold. It is intentionally designed to select the very best leader with as little bias as possible. CAP also resisted an attempt by then-General Charles Hamilton to interfere in the selection process for his former assistant, a black female subordinate, in early 2024. The Army's Inspector General found that Hamilton had improperly manipulated her performance records through a fudged evaluation and multiple prestigious awards, strengthening her file for command consideration. In a paperboard review, the officer's file looked stellar. It earned 63 points out of a total of 66, according to the Inspector General's report, but CAP found her unfit. Her score at the event put her in the first percentile, meaning she scored worse than 99% of participants. The interview board, according to the IG report, unanimously ruled she was not ready for command due to a poor operational psychology assessment and low leadership and strategic thinking ability. Her peer and subordinate evaluations were mixed. Hamilton attempted to pressure CAP to change its assessment, the IG report said. A second interview panel also found the officer not ready for command. He ultimately circumvented the CAP system to secure a policy exemption from Army Chief of Staff General Randy George for the officer to be placed on the command list. Hamilton did not respond to an inquiry from USA Today. When Military.com, a military-focused news publication, published an investigation based on a memo written by CAP's director documenting Hamilton's interference, the Army placed him under investigation. He ultimately was fired and demoted to lieutenant general upon retirement. The officer Hamilton had attempted to assist was removed from the battalion command list. In a letter to then Army Secretary Christine Wormuth asking for reinstatement that was seen by USA Today, Hamilton said he intervened because of CAP's disparate impact on black officers. Wormuth made CAP a permanent program after the Hamilton affair concluded. The directive establishing the program made it more difficult for generals, regardless of their motivations, to put their thumbs on the scale by circumventing the system. Contributing to that story was Joey Garrison of USA Today. Healy puts Massachusetts on its own vaccine path is our next story in the Cape Cod Times of September 8th, a Monday. It's written by Allison Kuznits of the State House News Service. After months of state public health officials vowing to protect vaccine access amid drastic federal changes, Governor Maura Healey on Thursday announced state measures designed to break ties with federal immunization policies, ensure the availability of COVID-19 booster shots at retail pharmacies, mandate insurance coverage of vaccines, and establish a regional public health collaborative. Under the Trump administration, the CDC's been hijacked by people like Robert Kennedy, people who don't believe in science, and people who don't believe in science-based health care, Healey said at a press conference surrounded by state health care and industry leaders and lawmakers focused on health policy. As a result, the government is failing its responsibility to Americans, including Bay Staters, Healey added. So we're here to say this is not going to happen in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, we will not let Donald Trump or Robert Kennedy get in the way of patients and the care and the treatments and the medication that they want and need. Department of Public Health Commissioner Robbie Goldstein said Massachusetts and health officials across the Northeast will issue guidance later this month surrounding the 2025-2026 flu season. DPH on Thursday updated its vaccine administration policy, enabling pharmacists to administer vaccines and emergency medications that have been approved by Goldstein. The maneuver promotes the availability and distribution of vaccines in Massachusetts beyond those approved by the U.S. FDA. The DPH commissioner may decide to make recommendations for vaccine use in populations or recommend usage schedules that aren't listed in the original FDA-approved or authorized product information, the policy states. Under these circumstances, qualified pharmacy personnel may administer those vaccines in accordance with the most current DPH commissioner recommendations, even if the recommendations differ from the manufacturer's FDA-approved or authorized labeling. The revised policy comes as Massachusetts also looks to extricate itself from recommendations made by the CDC's revamped Federal Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. Healey in July filed legislation that would disentangle state vaccine policies from that panel, enabling Goldstein to establish routine childhood immunizations for all residents younger than 19 years old. Healey also incorporated a similar provision into a spending bill filed in August that remains before a House committee. The Division of Insurance and DPH issued a bulletin Wednesday requiring insurers to cover vaccines that are recommended by DPH and not rely solely on CDC recommendations, the Healey administration said. The bulletin applies to respiratory virus vaccines, including for COVID, flu, and RSV, plus routine childhood shots, such as the MMR for measles, chickenpox, and hepatitis B. Healey pointed out no other state has taken a similar approach yet. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts and the Massachusetts Association of Health Plans support the insurance directive, administration officials said. As Massachusetts takes steps to empower the Department of Public Health to set independent vaccine standards, MAHP member plans remain steadfast in our commitment to ensuring coverage of evidence-based care, MAHP CEO Laura Pellegrini said in a statement. MAHP and our member plans stand ready to work with the Healey administration, with providers, and with public health leaders to ensure that every Massachusetts resident has access to the immunizations they need to stay healthy. MassHealth and the Group Insurance Commission are taking similar measures to provide vaccine coverage, Healey said. U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy, who's long voiced skepticism about vaccines, this summer fired all ACIP members and installed new appointees. That panel is slated to hold its next meeting on September 18th and 19th, with votes expected on COVID vaccines. Kennedy in May announced the CDC would no longer recommend COVID shots for healthy pregnant women and children. While we hope that their process will utilize a thorough review of the safety and effectiveness of vaccines, DPH is prepared to move quickly to provide clear communication, reduce confusion, and maintain access to these vital protections, Goldstein said. Goldstein said he will have final say over state-level guidance. The state will also vet policies through the Mass Vaccine Purchasing Advisory Council, national professional societies, and regional public health partners, he said. Healey, asked about potential federal pushback to Massachusetts charting its own vaccine path, told reporters, "I have an obligation to take care of and look after the well-being and the public health of people in Massachusetts, and I will continue to uphold my responsibility and my constitutional duty," she added. The FDA last week approved COVID shots but restricted their availability among healthy children and young adults, the AP reported. The FDA also revoked the emergency authorization for Pfizer's shot to children under 5 years old. Shots were previously available to all individuals 6 months and older, regardless of health conditions, according to NPR. In light of the FDA changes, CVS last week said the pharmacy chain could not administer COVID vaccine shots in Massachusetts, Nevada, and Mexico, even to individuals with prescriptions, due to the current regulatory environment, according to CBS News. Walgreens was also limiting access to the shots. In a countermeasure, DPH has issued a standing order that will allow pharmacists to administer COVID booster shots to Bay Staters over age 5. The Board of Registration of Pharmacy posted the standing order Wednesday, outlining the various types of COVID shots that can be administered to individuals age 12 and older, as well as to children ages 5 to 11. Healey said CVS and Walgreens will start scheduling COVID vaccination appointments on Friday. Children under age 5 can receive COVID vaccines from their pediatricians, the administration said. Goldstein, pressed on who's eligible to receive COVID boosters at those pharmacies, noted the state has yet to release guidance for the upcoming flu season. We still have our active recommendations for 2024-25, and those recommendations say that anyone 6 months and older is eligible for a COVID vaccine, Goldstein said. We recommend if someone wants to get it right now, they look to those eligibility criteria. Among adults ages 19 and older in Massachusetts, roughly 80% of COVID vaccines were administered in pharmacies during the 24-25 flu season, according to DPH. Massachusetts is also spearheading an initiative to establish a public health collaborative with states in New England and the Northeast. The collaborative will develop evidence-based recommendations for vaccines, disease surveillance, emergency preparedness, and supporting state public health labs, Healy's office said. California Governor Gavin Newsom, Oregon Governor Tina Kotek, and Washington Governor Bob Ferguson launched the West Coast Alliance on Wednesday, aimed at coordinating regional public health guidance. The group, citing recent federal actions that have undermined the independence of the CDC and raised concerns about the politicization of science, will start off by focusing on immunization policy. The CDC has become a political tool that increasingly peddles ideology instead of science. California, Oregon, and Washington will not allow the people of our states to be put at risk, the governors said in a joint statement. Florida on Wednesday announced plans to end all vaccine mandates, including for students. Florida Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo said at a press conference that each vaccine mandate is wrong and drips with disdain and slavery, according to CNN. Healy called Florida's action crazy. I think Ron DeSantis is putting politics over public health, Healy said. I think a lot of people are going to think twice about going to Florida. I don't think measles was a souvenir you were looking to return with after a trip to Disney World. Vaccine policy turbulence at the federal level has been compounded by escalating hesitancy and skepticism, leading to a lower uptake in immunizations. New poll results on Thursday from Massachusetts Families for Vaccines show that 70% of registered voters support bills from Representative Andy Vargas and Senator Ed Kennedy that would eliminate the religious carve-out for immunizations required in public, private, and charter K-12 schools. The proposals had a hearing in early June. The vast majority of respondents also said they believe childhood immunizations are safe and effective, according to the poll that was conducted by Beacon Research. To protect our classrooms, our families, and our most vulnerable residents from preventable diseases, it's important we remove the religious exemption loophole, Vargas said in a statement. We would be catching up to neighboring states and even the Texas Catholic schools, which no longer recognize religious exemptions. Along the same lines, the next headline on the cover of the Cape Cod Times, dated September 8th, New England senators attack RFK Jr. at a hostile Senate hearing, by Margie Cullen of the USA Today Network in New England. Democratic senators from New England attacked Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at a hostile Senate hearing on September 4th. The Senate Finance Committee hearing comes amid chaos at the CDC, including the loss of the director and resignations in protest of Kennedy's leadership and controversial views on vaccines. On September 3rd, more than 1,000 current and former Health and Human Services officials called for Kennedy to step down from his position, saying he was endangering the nation's health by spreading inaccurate health information. At the hearing, Senators Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and Maggie Hassan slammed Kennedy for his skepticism of and new restrictions on COVID-19 vaccines and his firing of the CDC director. In May, Kennedy announced that the only people who will be recommended for COVID-19 vaccines are those over 65 and people with existing health problems. He specifically changed the recommendations so pregnant women and healthy children aren't included. These changes, which bypassed the normal scientific review process, may make it harder for others who want the COVID-19 vaccine to get it, including healthcare workers and healthy people under 65 with a vulnerable family member or those who want to reduce their short-term risk of infection. In a fiery exchange on Thursday, Warren accused Kennedy of lying during his confirmation hearing. "You promised that you wouldn't take away vaccines from anyone who wanted them," she said. "You just changed the classification of the COVID vaccine." Kennedy responded most Americans will still be able to get the vaccine from their pharmacy and said that he doesn't want to recommend products where there's no clinical data for that indication. "So you're just going to deny that when people can't get access, that you're not taking it away?" Warren said. "If you don't recommend, then the consequence of that is in many states is that you can walk into a pharmacy. You can't get one. It means insurance companies don't have to cover the $200 or so cost. As Senator Dr. Cassidy said, you are effectively denying people the vaccines." Both Sanders and Hassan praised Operation Warp Speed, which delivered the COVID-19 vaccine in 2020. President Donald Trump has praised the accomplishment in the past, saying that it saved tens of millions of lives worldwide, but has lately been demanding the manufacturers prove it's been effective. Sanders asked Kennedy whether he believes that the vaccine saved tens of millions of lives, as Trump has said, or that it was the deadliest vaccine ever made. Kennedy denied saying the latter and said in response to a similar question from Hassan that he doesn't know how many lives were saved because of a lack of data. Multiple studies have shown that the vaccine reduced infections and severe diseases and saved at least 3 million lives in the U.S. and millions more abroad in the first 2 years of the pandemic, Hassan said. "I will also note, just as you've been talking about data, concern about it, the process for COVID vaccine approval was public." Last week, Kennedy dismissed Susan Monterey as the head of the CDC. Kennedy has declined to discuss his interactions with Monterey, who alleged in the Wall Street Journal September 4th that she was asked by Kennedy to pre-approve recommendations by a newly installed panel filled with people who have publicly expressed anti-vaccine rhetoric. But on Thursday, he told Warren that she had to resign. "I asked her, 'Are you a trustworthy person?' and she said no," Kennedy told Warren. "If you had an employee who told you they weren't trustworthy, would you ask them to resign?" Sanders pressed Kennedy on his response. "You're calling her a liar," Sanders said. Contributing to that report were Philip Bailey and Karen Weintraub. Shark season isn't over on Cape Cod as fall swimming risks rise, by Beth McDermott. Its report is assisted by AI. As summer ends, Cape Cod National Seashore remains a popular spot for recreation. However, lifeguard services have ended for the season, and the ocean presents ongoing risks, according to a community announcement. Shark activity remains high through September and October. The presence of great white sharks and gray seals off Cape Cod has drawn significant attention in recent years. Both species have long been part of the ecosystem. Sharks, which have existed for more than 400 million years, play a critical role as top predators in maintaining a balanced marine environment. Seals, the prey for great white sharks, have also increased in population. Each summer and fall, sharks are observed hunting seals closer to shore. Spotter planes regularly report shark activity near the outer Cape, including in areas used by swimmers. While shark bites on humans are rare, a fatal incident did occur in Wellfleet in September of 2018. Beachgoers are reminded that lifeguards are no longer on duty. Rip currents, undertows, and shore breaks are hazardous. It's important to be aware that sharks hunt for seals in shallow water and to avoid areas where seals are present. Swimmers should stay close to shore and never swim alone. In emergencies, call 911. Emergency call boxes and bleeding control kits are available at beaches. To enhance public safety, the National Park Service and local organizations have collaborated on shark advisory signs and educational materials. Visitors can find Shark Smart resources at all National Seashore beaches. This story was created by reporter Beth McDermott with the assistance of artificial intelligence. Journalists were involved in every step of the information gathering, the review, editing, and the publishing process. We'll close out our reading of the Cape Cod Times today. There's no local news, really, with a different kind of news, the obituaries and death notices. Our first obituary in the Cape Cod Times of September 8th is of Louis Mark Yamoski of Orleans, Dr. Louis Mark Yamasky, one of the world's kindest and gentlest souls, passed away suddenly at home in South Orleans, Massachusetts on August 30th, 2025. A native of Baltimore, Louis was a dedicated Orioles fan and a proud Maryland Terp. A memorial celebration of Louis's life will be held at the Town Cove Tap House, 22A Main Street in Orleans, on Sunday, September 14th, from 1 to 4 p.m. That's this coming Sunday. All are welcome to attend. In lieu of flowers, please consider a tax-deductible donation to Behavioral Health Innovators, P.O. Box 583, South Chatham, Mass. The next obituary is of Michael L. Sisson of West Yarmouth. Dr. Michael L. Sisson, affectionately known to many as Doc and Dr. Mike, passed peacefully in West Yarmouth on Saturday, August 30th, at the age of 77. Michael's love for sailing and fishing brought him to Cape Cod, where he settled in 1979 and began his career as an anesthesiologist at Cape Cod Hospital. In 1984, at the age of 36, his career was cut short when he sustained a severe stroke. In addition to innumerable community members and friends, Michael is survived by his former wife, Linda Frederick, and many other friends and family who will miss him dearly. The funeral services will be private. In lieu of flowers, donations may be made in Michael's name to Tufts University and Cape Cod Hospice Care. May his memory be for a blessing. The next obituary in today's Cape Cod Times is of Faye E. Doobie of Marston's Mills, who at the age of 99 passed on Tuesday, September 2nd. Faye was born August 13th, 1926 in Middleborough. She attended the Middleborough schools until the 8th grade when she went to work at the Cape Cod Standard Times calendar factory to help support her family. She loved to attend dances at Otis Air Force Base, where she had the opportunity to meet many interesting servicemen. This is where she met the love of her life, Orem Ray Doobie. They were married on November 8th of 1952 and started a family traveling the world while Ray was in the military. Following his retirement, they made their home in Marston's Mills, where they raised their 2 children. In 2014, they moved to White River Junction to be closer to their daughter. Faye loved spending time outdoors gathering wild berries or sitting on the beach watching the waves crash in. She was a talented organist and absolutely loved moving her feet on the dance floor, but her greatest joy came from spending time with her family. She's preceded in death by her beloved husband Ray, and many family and friends will miss her dearly. Faye will be interred with her husband at the Mass National Cemetery in Bourne at the convenience of the family. Night funeral in White River Junction has been entrusted with arrangements. Condolences to Faye's family may be expressed in an online guest book at nightfuneralhomes.com, and that's KNIGHT funeralhomes.com. And the final obituary in today's Cape Cod Times is of Ruth Treen of Chatham, Mass. A celebration of life for Ruth Treen will be held Saturday, September 20th, this coming Saturday at 2 p.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Meeting House in Chatham, Mass. For those who are unable to attend, the service will be live streamed at uumh.net on their Sunday service Zoom link. And with that, we've come to the end of our reading of today's Cape Cod Times. There was very little local news other than obituaries in it. This is your reader, Eric, saying be well, be safe, look after each other, and remember our veterans, especially those we've lost recently. Bye for now.